Hi, my name is Christian Devine and welcome to Retro View, a safe zone for physical media. I hope you all had a wonderful Halloween. I had intended to do a few more movies, but life and work get in the way sometimes. But I will get to the movies I intended to do because, frankly, Halloween is a state of mind and I like to keep that state of mind going all year round. And because November 3rd is also known as Godzilla Day.
You may wish to deny it, but your eyes tell you it's true. The mightiest monster of them all. See Godzilla!
And because Godzilla is my favorite monster of all time, if I'm forced to admit, I think it would be a perfect time to retro view a spectacular new, very exciting release, which is the 4K version of Mothra vs Godzilla from 1964.
5月はモスラ対ゴジラ。
モスラよ。モスラが来たわ。
最新のデジタル技術を駆使して蘇った守護神モスラ。破壊王ゴジラ。
This is the first series of 4K Godzilla releases from Toho, and I have to preface this and immediately say this is not available in America. I ordered this from CD Japan, who are very reliable, and this shipped even faster than I thought it would. Like I said, I don't pay attention to shipping times unless I'm really antsy for something because I know it's going to get there or here. And just looking at the clock makes it go a little slower, and I like there to be a little kind of element of surprise. Like I said, it's like Christmas all year round, or your birthday. And so they've released the first series of Godzilla films, or they will be releasing. So they've released the original 1954 Godzilla on 4K, and Mothra vs Godzilla is the other 4K release, and they're going to be followed by the rest of the films in the Showa period, the 50s through the 70s period, the kind of golden age of Godzilla, if you will. And certainly Mothra vs Godzilla, also known in America as Godzilla vs the Thing in its its US domestic release in 1964.
Godzilla versus the Thing. Godzilla, monster of monsters, and the mysterious Thing defy man's mightiest weapons. See Godzilla versus the Thing in color and Terrascope.
For some reason, changing the title because the word Thing was kind of a sci-fi monster trope, and they tried to create some kind of mystery as to what monster Godzilla would be fighting. And 1964 was a very important year for monster fans because it was really the year of the monster, and even called that at the time because there was a wave of monster films and monster magazine and monster models and monster toys and monster series, and Godzilla had already kind of reached peak cultural phenomenon status because only 2 years earlier in 1962, King Kong vs. Godzilla was an enormous hit in America and not only in Japan. And so Godzilla really was on the cultural map. And American International Pictures handled the distribution for Godzilla vs. the Thing. And of course they did their thing of altering the film for the American market with dubbing and scene and music deletions and alterations, etc. And the thing is that a few of these releases that were dubbed and altered, some of them were actually pretty good. And in many cases, these were the gateway Godzilla movies for us monster kids. And so we accepted the kind of flaws of the dubbing or not getting the full story, etc. And sometimes they did a really great job of dubbing. And one of the times they did an excellent job of dubbing is Titra Studios did the dubbing for Godzilla vs. the Thing, and it's excellent. The voices sound good, they're not cartoony, and there's a somewhat approximation at least to the character personalities of the Japanese actors. And it's too bad we won't really see those original AIP releases remastered, because Toho now owns the rights, and they're very, very exclusive with them, as anybody who's had to deal with Toho knows. And it's, once again, rather surprising that for this 4K release, which would be very much anticipated by, obviously, American fans and global fans of kaiju, to get this, that this particular disc has no subtitles and is really made for a Japanese audience, or an audience like me and you who are going to get this because we know the film already and want to see how it looks in 4K. So instead of going to a long history of Godzilla and my relationship with Godzilla, which is very long and profound, and like I said, I'm really a huge Godzilla fan, and I've written about Godzilla even. My kind of outre favorite Godzilla movie of all time is Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, aka Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, from 1971. The echo horror psychedelic Godzilla film, the most unique Godzilla film. I've written about it in Monster Attack Team and even introduced screenings of it around town. So we'll talk about Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster at some other point. But Godzilla vs. the Thing, Mothra against Godzilla, is definitely in the top 3 of my favorite Godzilla films. And it's, of course, widely considered one of the best Godzilla films ever made. Ishiro Honda, the director, was really firing on all cylinders. And Akira Ikafube's score is always magnificent, and some of the greatest genre music ever composed for any films. Just really effective and melodic and powerful movie music. And of course, Eiji Tsuburay's wonderful miniature work and suit work is just glorious. And to get to the subject at hand, how does the 4K version, the first 4K of Godzilla film that we've seen look? It looks, in a word, spectacular. Now, I don't know exactly the level of corrections they did, DNR, all the things that sometimes we don't like to be done to the film to take away from the purity of the grain of the image. All I know is that it looks absolutely ravishingly clean, and the detail is amazing. And of course, you're going to see more of the wire work, you're going to see more of the backdrops, but there's a surreality to the Godzilla universe that I think we all accept, and it's part of the charm of the films, and it's what some critics didn't quite understand. Yes, we know they're men in suits. We know these are miniatures, but they're also gloriously detailed, and they create entire worlds in just a few images. And that's why it's always been really important to see the Toho films in their proper aspect ratio, because these are widescreen films, and a lot of us grew up watching these films on TV with squished images, and the magic still came through. So when you started seeing the widescreen super Toho scope images, you really even get more of the flavor of the Godzillaverse. So the special effects work in Mothra against Godzilla is some of the best in any of the Toho Godzilla films or any of the kaiju films ever made. And it's a debatable point about what's the best looking Godzilla in any movie. But in my humble opinion, and others share this, this is the best looking Godzilla ever put on film. The very malevolent looking eyelids and those jowls. And by the way, this was the last time that Godzilla was a destructive force. The next movie, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, that would be the time that Godzilla decides to start helping the human race that created Godzilla. But Godzilla's introduction scene in this is one of the best in the series. I really love the introduction in King Kong vs. Godzilla where he comes out of the iceberg, but this is pretty great where he comes out of the ground, and it's just an awesome, totally classic Godzilla moment. And I like the way that Godzilla is kind of this, you know, rumbling, stumbling monster, and he kind of collapses into buildings and roars and knocks them down. And the wonderful fight scenes with Mothra and the two caterpillars are really well done, and there's even some stop motion animation, it looks like, in there, and they pull out all of the special effects stops. And once again, it's that kind of surrealism that to me is very appealing about the Godzilla films. They're not trying for reality. And one of the reasons that these films have thrived to this day is that we accept this kind of childlike point of view of the monsters and the miniatures and the universe that the kaiju are in. And that's why it's amazing today that Godzilla is still going strong. And the last time I was in Japan 3 years ago, I actually stayed for the first time at the Godzilla Hotel. That is what a fan I am. And I happened to have been there on November 3rd, and there were Godzilla Day celebrations going on throughout the entire city. It was very cool. And in terms of physical media, I have been pining for years for Toho to properly remaster their films, because even though they look really great in widescreen, and there's been multiple widescreen releases, most recently, of course, with the amazing Criterion set, there still needs to be a lot of restorative work done on the films, as you can tell. And Toho, as I've said and others know, are very particular about what they do or don't do with these films, despite the fact that there's an eager global market of fans waiting to drop cash for these films in a proper formatting. And so it looks like we're going to be getting this, because I'm certain that this release in 4K eventually will make its way to American shores and elsewhere. And if you know the films as well as I do, and others, they're worth owning simply to watch the beautiful image. And it does look spectacular in 4K. And this disc is pretty loaded with stuff. There's 3 different audio tracks. The original DTS 2003 remix, and then a DTS HD Master Audio. There's special effects outtake reel, which is very cool, of just all these unused shots. That's one thing that Toho Studios, they really definitely, looks like they really do keep a good archive of this stuff. So there's amazing behind the scenes footage. And there's a collection of trailers and all sorts of extra features on here that make this disc completely worth owning. And it was only, I think, $40, $50 that I paid in CD Japan. And you know what you really pay the money for is the delivery fee. So it wasn't too much, and they really do get this stuff out fast to you. And DHL is a great, you know, mail carrier service. So I have no worries about this material. I have no issue with this material ever arriving late or damaged. Like I said, the picture quality is absolutely fantastic. Mothra against Godzilla has never looked this good. I'm not sure it could ever look better than this release. And I'm excited about the potential of a domestic release and see what they'll include. It's unlikely that we'll ever see, once again, the original AIP cut of Godzilla vs. the Thing. And Toho has their own particular reasons for almost completely ignoring the American versions of these films and really doing their best to make sure they're not released. And that's a shame, because some of the dubbed versions of the US releases are much better than the international dubbed versions, actually. Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster being the perfect example, and Destroy All Monsters being another pretty famous example. And so I would highly encourage you to order this however you can, from wherever you can. It's going to be around, and we're going to have the rest of the Godzilla Showa period to look forward to, and I'll talk more about some of these films as they come along. And so I hope you celebrate Godzilla Day in the best way possible by watching your favorite Godzilla movie. And I'm going to pop in this copy of Mothra against Godzilla in 4K again, and then followed up with the chaser of Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. So once again, thank you for retro viewing. Please like and subscribe, or I'll tell Godzilla.